They were told they lacked the skill, the speed, and the intelligence to fly. Yet, over the skies of Europe, these men proved otherwise. They fought not only the enemy in front of them, but the prejudice within their own nation, and by doing so, they changed the course of history. This is the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails. The early years of World War II brought America face to face with its own contradictions. The nation that spoke of freedom and democracy was still divided by the color line. As the military expanded to meet the global threat, many believed that black men had no place in the cockpit of a fighter plane. They could serve as cooks, mechanics, or laborers, but not pilots. The idea of a black man commanding a high-performance aircraft was, to some in the War Department, unthinkable. But others refused to accept that lie. Leaders from the black press, civil rights organizations, and Congress pressed the Roosevelt administration for change. They pointed to the thousands of qualified black college graduates, to the men eager to serve their country with honor. Finally, in 1941, the War Department relented, reluctantly, and announced the creation of an experimental flying unit, the 99th Pursuit Squadron. Its members would train at a new facility in Tuskegee, Alabama. Tuskegee Army Airfield was isolated, surrounded by red clay fields and southern heat. The trainees arrived from every corner of the country, men who had dreamed of flying, who had studied mathematics and navigation, who had faced rejection again and again. Now they stood at the edge of possibility. Among them were names that would later echo in history: Benjamin O. Davis Jr., Charles McGee, Roscoe Brown, Lee Archer. They carried on their shoulders the hopes of an entire generation. Training was grueling. Every day began before dawn with drills, mechanical work, and hours of instruction in aerodynamics and flight physics. Their white instructors watched closely, some expecting them to fail. Aircraft were scarce, and so was patience. The slightest mistake could mean expulsion. But one by one, the cadets proved they could match, and exceed, the standards set for any pilot in the U.S. Army Air Corps. Benjamin O. Davis Jr., the son of the Army's first black general, became their commanding officer. He embodied discipline and quiet strength. He knew that their performance would decide not only their future, but the reputation of every black soldier in uniform. His message to his men was clear: excellence was the only answer to prejudice. By 1943, the 99th Squadron had completed its training. Their next challenge lay far from the Alabama fields, in the war-torn skies of North Africa. When they arrived overseas, some of their white counterparts viewed them with skepticism. They were assigned older P-50 Warhawks, tough but outdated planes. Their missions at first were limited: ground attack runs, strafing enemy positions, supporting troops. They wanted to fly fighters in combat, to prove they could hold their own. But they would have to earn that right. The desert sun beat down as they took off for their first missions over Pantelleria and Sicily. German and Italian forces were entrenched, and every flight meant facing anti-aircraft fire. The Tuskegee pilots flew low and fast, destroying enemy supply lines and vehicles. Their skill and precision began to draw attention. Reports reached headquarters: the 99th had performed admirably under fire. Still, prejudice followed them. Some commanders claimed their combat record was weak, using selective statistics to argue for their removal. An official review board was convened. It was a pivotal moment. Their reputation hung in the balance. Colonel Davis traveled to Washington to defend his men. He spoke with measured resolve, presenting their record: every mission completed, every aircraft returned when possible, every target engaged. The board found no fault in their performance. The 99th would continue to fly. By early 1944, the Army Air Corps consolidated the 99th with 3 new all-black fighter squadrons, the 100th, 301st, and 302nd, to form the 332nd Fighter Group. Their base was now in Italy, operating under the 15th Air Force. They were given sleek new P-51 Mustangs, fast, powerful aircraft that could escort bombers deep into enemy territory. The tails of these planes were painted crimson-red, a bold mark of identity that soon earned them a name, the Red Tails. For the first time, the Tuskegee Airmen were entrusted with long-range escort missions, protecting American B-17s and B-24s on their bombing runs into the heart of Nazi Germany. At a time when bomber losses were staggering, these men carried an impossible burden. They were outnumbered, often facing the Luftwaffe's best. But they had something no statistic could measure: determination born from years of doubt. Their first major escort mission took them across the Alps, into enemy airspace thick with flak. As the silver bombers droned toward their targets, the Red Tails formed a shield around them. They flew tight formations, scanning the sky for enemy fighters. When German Messerschmitts appeared, the Tuskegee pilots broke off in disciplined pairs, engaging swiftly and with precision. Their goal was not glory, it was protection. Each bomber that returned safely was a victory. Their reputation grew quickly. Bomber crews began to request the Red Tails by name. They trusted them to bring them home. The Crimson Tails became a welcome sight against the cold European sky. In letters sent back to base, bomber crews wrote, "When we see those Red Tails, we know we'll make it back." Through 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group flew mission after mission, to Munich, Vienna, and Budapest. They faced fierce resistance, heavy losses, and the constant test of endurance. But their performance silenced critics. Their discipline and courage were undeniable. By the time they were assigned the ultimate target, Berlin, they were no longer an experiment. They were elite. Back home, word of their success began to spread. Newspapers that once doubted their abilities now hailed them as heroes. For young Black Americans, their story was proof that excellence could shatter barriers. For the military, it was evidence that segregation in the skies made no sense at all. As 1945 approached, the Red Tails prepared for their most dangerous missions yet, into the heart of the Reich, where the Luftwaffe would throw everything it had left into the fight. By early 1945, the war in Europe was reaching its violent climax. Germany, desperate and cornered, unleashed its newest weapons, faster, deadlier aircraft meant to turn the tide. Among them were the revolutionary Messerschmitt Me-262 jets, capable of speeds no Allied propeller plane could match. Against these machines, even the best pilots faced impossible odds. But the Red Tails had never been strangers to the impossible. On the morning of March 24, 1945, the skies over Germany were cold and clear. It was the kind of day pilots remembered for a lifetime. The target, Berlin, the heart of Hitler's crumbling empire. More than 1,600 American bombers took off that day, guarded by squadrons of fighters, including the 332nd. Their mission was to strike the Daimler-Benz factory, a vital part of the enemy's jet production line. The Luftwaffe would not let them pass unchallenged. As the bombers crossed into enemy airspace, radar stations along the German frontier lit up. Within minutes, swarms of Me-262s climbed to intercept, their jet engines howling across the sky. The Red Tails broke formation to engage. What followed would become one of the most remarkable dogfights of the war. Captain Roscoe Brown and his wingman dove from altitude, spotting two jets streaking toward the bombers. Brown pulled into a sharp turn, anticipating their attack run. The first jet flashed by, its guns blazing. Brown fired a burst from his P-51's 50 caliber machine guns. Tracers reached out across the cold blue sky. The jet shuddered, caught fire, and fell in flames. Moments later, Captain Charles Brantley downed another. In less than an hour, the Red Tails had destroyed several of Germany's most advanced aircraft, a stunning blow to the Luftwaffe. When the bombers returned, air crews counted the losses. Not one bomber had fallen under Red Tail protection that day. It was a record that became legend. For the Tuskegee Airmen, Berlin wasn't just another mission, it was the moment they proved, beyond doubt, that skill and courage knew no color. Their achievements could be measured not only in kills or missions flown, but in trust earned. In a war defined by industrial might, the Red Tails stood out as symbols of discipline and devotion. Over 15,000 sorties, nearly 1,500 missions, and hundreds of enemy aircraft destroyed, yet it was their reputation as the most reliable escort group in the U.S. Army Air Forces that became their true mark of honor. Bomber crews called them the Angels of the Sky. Still, for all their valor abroad, another kind of battle awaited them at home. When the war ended, the Tuskegee Airmen returned to a nation still uncertain of their place in it. There were no parades for the Red Tails, no ticker tape falling over city streets. Many were met instead with the same prejudice they had faced before they ever took flight. The irony was cruel. Men who had defended freedom overseas were denied it in their own towns. But they did not fade quietly into history. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. remained in the service, rising through the ranks to become the first black general in the modern U.S. Air Force. Others, like Charles McGee, continued to fly in Korea and Vietnam, passing on their knowledge to new generations of pilots. Together, they became living proof that perseverance could reshape a nation. Their success forced the military, and America itself, to confront the contradiction between its ideals and its practices. In 1948, just 3 years after the war ended, President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981, officially desegregating the U.S. Armed Forces. The Red Tails had helped make that possible. Their record, written in courage and sacrifice, left no room for argument. The Tuskegee program eventually closed, but its spirit lived on. The men who once trained in the red dust of Alabama went on to become educators, leaders, and pioneers in aviation and civil rights. They carried the same quiet dignity that had sustained them through years of doubt and danger. And when the next generation of pilots, of every color and background, took to the skies, they did so on the wings the Red Tails had built. Today, their story is no longer confined to history books. It lives in museums, in classrooms, and in the memories of those who understand what they overcame. It lives in the roar of jet engines, in the gleam of aircraft that bear the same red markings, a tribute to those who paved the way. And it lives in the idea that courage is colorless, that valor belongs to anyone who dares to rise above. For the men of the 332nd Fighter Group, victory was never just about defeating the enemy. It was about proving that they belonged in the same sky, on the same mission, fighting for the same flag. Their journey from Tuskegee's training fields to the skies over Berlin remains one of the most extraordinary chapters in American military history. They had faced the weight of doubt, the sting of discrimination, the uncertainty of combat, and they had triumphed. When the Red Tails soared over Berlin, they weren't just fighting a war. They were fighting for recognition, for respect, and for a future their country had yet to promise them. Long after the war ended, the legend of the Red Tails continued to inspire. In classrooms and airshows, in documentaries and films, their legacy took flight again and again. Young cadets, looking up at the sky, learned that history had already been rewritten by men who refused to accept the limits others placed on them. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen became more than history, it became a promise. A reminder that courage, discipline, and unity could break even the hardest barriers. In 2007, more than 60 years after their first missions, surviving members of the Tuskegee Airmen were honored in Washington, D.C., with the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian award bestowed by the United States Congress. Many were old, their hair silver, their eyes still sharp. They stood before a nation that had finally come to understand the depth of their contribution. When asked what the honor meant, one pilot smiled and said, "It means we were right." Their journey from being dismissed as unfit to fly to becoming one of the most respected units of World War II stands as a testament to what determination can achieve. Each mission they flew, each bomber they escorted, each life they saved, all became part of a legacy that would shape not just the Air Force, but the American conscience itself. As the sun sets over the fields of Tuskegee, the airfield where their story began still stands. The runways are quiet now, but echoes remain, the hum of engines, the voices of instructors, the laughter of young men who once looked to the sky with hope and conviction. In the distance, the wind whispers through the hangars, carrying with it the memory of those crimson tails streaking across the horizon. They were more than pilots. They were pioneers. They were proof that the sky was never the limit, it was only the beginning. When history remembers the war's great battles, Normandy, the Bulge, Iwo Jima, it must also remember the battles fought within hearts and minds. The Red Tails fought both, and won both. Their courage didn't just change the outcome of missions, it changed the meaning of freedom itself. For in the end, the story of the Tuskegee Airmen is the story of America, a story of struggle, resilience, and redemption. A story of men who looked to the heavens and decided that nothing, not even prejudice, would keep them grounded. They proved to the world that honor has no color, that courage has no boundaries, and that sometimes, the greatest victory is not the one fought in the skies, but the one won in the soul. The Red Tails, guardians of the sky, defenders of freedom, and the men who taught a nation how to rise.